Hey everybody, just coming on to talk a little bit about a hot topic for junior year, seniors too, we'll talk about that in a minute. We are talking about ACT preparation / SAT, and I just want to take a minute to answer some of the most frequently asked questions for you guys, kind of just explain some of the things that I think are going on in everyone's minds in the midst of a crazy time here. And so question number one, should my student prep for the ACT or the SAT? I can't necessarily answer that for you, it's personal choice, but I just want to make something very clear. Just because the state of Illinois has a contract with the SAT company does not mean that the colleges are looking at those tests any differently. So the best test to prep for, even though the one offered in the public schools is offered through the state and it's required, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the test you want to prep for, that's the SAT. The ACT, similar in format, has been more consistent over the years, and the setup usually lends itself better to the majority of students. So when you're considering which test to take, don't think like many parents do that just because the schools are offering that one, the public schools anyhow, that's the one the colleges are taking. Colleges all will still take the ACT. Almost all of them will accept the ACT as well as the SAT, other than a few elite East and West Coast schools, as far as I know. I draw the line there. I just do the prep and how to figure out how your brain works with the test and how to do better. So I work with ACT preparation, but what I want you to know just around making decisions about that, there's tons of companies out there you can do individual prep. There's online prep you can do, but I want you to make sure that you figure out which test you'd like to prep for. And I suggest putting a little bit more time into that one. For most students, I would say 90+% of them, they prefer the ACT and or the score comes out equivalent, and the ACT is a little bit easier to coach to because it's been more consistent over the years. ACT itself. So that test is offered several times throughout the year, and we'll talk about the timing of that. I'm not going to focus as much on the SAT. We're not really sure what's happening with school. I know it's being offered in the fall as of right now, in October, I think. But that's kind of changing, and I'm still unclear as to whether that's for juniors or seniors and how we're going to get the kids kind of ready. So if you're a junior, I suggest that you start looking at the earliest test date in February. I have some students who like to take it earlier. The ACT, it's at act.org. Their test dates are listed, and they generally are offered September, October, December, February. The most common one is April. They can also take it in June. There are select locations who offer it in July, but there are very few, so you might need to go to another state if you want July. But then going into senior year, you would also then have, of course, the September and the October tests. Definitely September if you want the scores back in time for like a November 1st deadline. So I generally, as a rule, recommend, and then everyone is customized. Everything I'm saying, it's going to be very personalized to you. But as a general rule, I suggest that they want to take it more than one time, and they should. February is a great time to do so. And I don't suggest any kind of crazy like 6 months, 12 months straight every single week, insane preparation for it. I don't think that most students need that. I do think and believe there is a point of overkill. And so when prepping for the ACT, do your research on it. I like ACT versus SAT. Anything that you're doing to prep for ACT should carry over to the SAT. There are many similar features on both of the tests now, but I just think that historically for almost 20 years of doing this, most students do prefer and score better on the ACT. So that being said, I'm going to explain a little bit about the test. Hopefully that answers a bunch of questions. For juniors, I suggest a couple things. One, either just kind of start prepping slow and steady, or two, hit it hard for a little while if you're not in a solid sports season, or who knows what things are going to look like this year, and then back off a little and then pick back up prior to the test you choose to take first. Or wait until, like, get a baseline of some sort and then wait until it's a little bit closer and hit it hard for those couple months prior. So it just really depends on the student. We have a lot of kids who kind of start in the summer and then back off and then refresh. The ACT itself is made up of 4 main sections. It's English, math, reading, and science. Science is not science, it's actually logic and reasoning. The 2 easiest sections that I have found to coach for and boost the score in are the English and the math. That holds true regardless of your ability. So if you're a phenomenal math student or you're really great at English, it doesn't necessarily mean that's how you're going to score on the test, or it's out of 36, which I'm sure most of you already know. If you're already scoring in the low 30s, that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. The math and English are very much strategy and approach, as well as content, right? And then the reading and the science sections are a little bit more reading comprehension, what is your skill and ability, and then very, strategy oriented, but it's both general strategy and then personalized strategy. So everything that I do when we're prepping for the ACT is highly customized. I do not have a set curriculum. We do not go with, any kind of extended instruction on grammar and math concepts and whatnot. We really kind of unveil those through practice tests and individualized error analysis. So how I work with students and how I would say, they could do this on their own too. So how I would suggest it is you get the practice book. It's called The Real ACT or The Original ACT. I can send a link out. I get it on Amazon. It's like $22. It's a red book. It's the only book with actual old questions and tests from the ACT company. If you're going through some other test prep type of organization to get your book, that's all right, but not necessarily, because it's not written by the people who actually write the ACT. And so there is going to be some variation in actual mindset and strategy, when approaching those questions. So that being said, I highly recommend you just get the one the ACT puts out. Bright red book, you can't miss it, on Amazon. Like I said, I can send out a link. I like students to do it section by section. So what we'll do is have them take an English, score it, and I give them instructions how to do it. And then we look at the errors and analyze for patterns. And so we're looking at both content gaps and then also strategy and approach. So I teach them to categorize the types of questions, figuring out which types they're missing. Teach them the ACT rule, which is very different sometimes from what we're being taught in school in English and writing. So we've got to kind of reconcile with the fact that the approach to this test is going to be very different from what they've been taught and told to do, which is to write longer and add commas, and that is not what the ACT wants. So it's going to be, very much getting behind the minds of each individual student and talking about, what were you thinking in that type of question? When you answered it, great. Now the next time you recognize this type of question, here's what you need to call on. Here's the tip and strategy that's going to work for you so that you don't make that mistake again, and so that you can approach the question correctly. So I teach them how to skim the answer choices and categorize the question and recognize what type of strategy or rule or piece of grammar is coming into play so that they can actually apply the correct approach and then, of course, get the answer right. So we'll do that, and we'll take notes, and they'll get a study guide very personalized to them as to what all those rules and reminders and strategies and formulas for math and the things they need to brush up on. So we'll do content and strategy all in a study guide. They take it home. After we complete the analysis of the first English, which sometimes, and math too, are longer, so they sometimes take 2 sessions to get through. Just it totally depends on how many the student misses and how consistent the patterns are. So once we get through a full analysis of that section for English, we have our study guide written. They study the study guide. They go back and take another English. So that way they're immediately reinforcing all of the approaches and the rules and the strategies that we just came up with. Then we come back, do some more analysis, build the study guide further, and then we switch over to math. Repeat the process. So we're going to do math, a full analysis, make the study guide, both approach and then obviously rules and actual mathematics, and then they'll go away, study the study guide, take another math to reinforce everything, and then we'll kind of do an analysis again and uncover additional pieces that we need to. Repeat for reading, repeat for science. Generally, our study guides are longer for the math and the English because we have content and strategy, whereas the reading and the science are very much more personalized and then general strategy and approach oriented. So hopefully that helps to answer kind of how that works. And you can look at any kind of program. You can do what I just explained on your own and look for the patterns and look for the errors. It's absolutely doable. The answer keys are in the back of the book. I can explain how to do it. I just wanted to clarify some of the confusion that people have. The ACT being required. Oh, and then I was just explaining that's kind of how I do it. I generally start with a 5-hour package, but some students are good to go in 3 hours, and we roll through, we make a study guide, they're great. Some students need more consistent guidance, 10 or 12 sessions, so kind of just depends. I typically do a 5-hour package for $720, but I do have a couple alternate options to lower that cost, so talk to me about that if you want to. Really, for the most part, I just wanted to explain the confusion around the test, and then the very last piece, and for seniors, this is where they come in. Why would I take the test is the question if the colleges aren't requiring it. So there's 2 reasons why you would want to take the test, and you may already know these, but this is kind of a big debate with a lot of families in light of everything going on with this global pandemic right now. And so the number 1 reason would be if you take it, you don't have to automatically submit your scores like when we were in school. You can choose to not submit it and then send them if it's good. So if it's good enough, it actually might help your chances for admission because you're able to say, here, look, this is what I'm capable of, even though they're not requiring it. The second reason would be for additional scholarship money or money from your school. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the fact that a lot of schools now do kind of like a merit-based grant or discount on tuition based on the score on the ACT. So it's just one way. The higher the score is, the more money they'll give you on your yearly tuition, and that totally depends on the school. So those would be 2 reasons to either consider taking the test and prepping for it, both junior year and senior year. We're not really sure what's going to happen the following year. I'm anticipating perhaps they're not going to require it again as well. And in addition to that, you're going to want to make sure the rest of your resume is beefed up as strongly as possible. So I think that's most of the questions. Wherever I post this or email this out to, feel free to send me back. I'm sure there are some things I forgot to cover, but hopefully that gives everybody a little bit of clarity around the test itself, and happy to chat and answer questions. I am thinking of doing a group this year, kind of a modified group and individual approach. I always do one-on-one for ACT prep, but there are enough fundamental concepts that we can cover, and so I think it might be really great to do it as a group. It would most likely be virtual for the basic instruction, and then the individual, I have been doing one-on-one, both required to wear masks, full sanitization. It's just really difficult when we have the practice book to write the notes and do the work and actually model and show all of the formulas and things while writing and individually analyzing the errors and teaching. It's difficult to do that virtually. Almost all the other work I do, we can do it virtually, but for the ACT prep or specific math work, it's just so much easier to do it side by side as far apart as we can sit. So that's kind of my take and my shtick on it. There are a lot of organizations and companies out there with all different kinds of packages and approaches. Mine is just, it's very unique because it's getting behind the mind and figuring out how it is that individual student needs to think and learn and approach the questions. And so for me, it's more important that they do that than that they necessarily go back and do 50,000 math problems and grammar reviews. I think sometimes that can be overkill. And so I don't even use necessarily in the beginning of the book all of the instructional pages. We really just dive in and make it very personalized and cover all of the basics along the way. So that's kind of what I do. You can use the same model and do it at home. There's awesome resources available online. There is a practice test at act.org. It's called Preparing for the ACT. I think there's a new one coming out shortly if they didn't release it today. Usually it's in August. And I think that they just opened up the test dates. As I'm recording this, it's July 27th. I think they were supposed to open them today for this upcoming next stretch of time. So reach out to me if you have questions. If you're getting this, you probably know where to find me. If you're seeing it on social media or YouTube, send me a note. I'm easy to find, and hopefully that's helpful. Enjoy. Have a good day. Stay safe and healthy.